three books I think everyone should read are my favourite novel of all time, which is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, her one novel, 1846, just before she died. It is a novel that changes every time you read it. It's a ghost story, it's a story of obsessive love, it's a story of race, it's a story of social engineering, it's a story about what it means to be a woman in a man's world. The one thing it isn't is a love story. But it's one of those stories that has gone into the landscape. And people know, if you want to talk about a love story, an obsessive love story, Cathy and Heathcliff. So they've stepped off the pages of the book. And so everybody has to read Wuthering Heights. It's what set me on my road to being a novelist. So that's my first one. My second one is Toni Morrison's first novel, The Bluest Eye. And that was written at the end of the 60s. And it is a very simple story on one hand about a young girl who understands that to have white skin and blue eyes is more successful in the very poor, difficult world that she lives in. And it's a very hard story of incest and abuse and racial violence and all of those things. But it was, for me, when I read that, The Bluest Eye, I thought, oh, I see. It really helped me to become a grown-up and see those things differently. So it's an extraordinary book. And my final one is Miss Marple. It is Agatha Christie's Sleeping Murder. It's her last Miss Marple book. It was published just after her death in the 1970s, but it had been written during the war and put away in a vault with the last Poirot, so that should she die in bombing in the war, the last books were there, the end of the stories of these two characters. And it's essentially a regressive memory story. It's so much ahead of its time. And a young girl goes home from New Zealand. She never thinks she's been in England before. And she gets to this house and she feels, this is the house that I must live in. And then a ball rolls away and she opens the cupboard and she sees the wallpaper that she knows is there. And little by little, exactly, we realise that she's been there before, and then the story comes. But for me, Agatha Christie, plotting, characterisation, a sense of a particular type of world, the perfection of what it means to tell a story, really tell a story. And I think Miss Marple is one of the most important characters in literature because she's an old woman. And because she's an old woman, she's overlooked. But you know, old women know everything. She's the most subversive character, I think, in most of crime fiction. So those are my three.